We're super excited to be here with you tonight. And this is a webinar called Your Story as a Force for Good in the World. This is the second in a two-part series where we're going to really dive deeper into the world of storytelling and talk about how to get your story in the world. I'm Richard Taubinger. I'm the founder of Conscious Marketer and also joined by Kylie. Hi, Kylie.
Hey, everybody. Welcome.
And I think we have over 5,000 people that have registered for the free series. And the quick question and answer sessions, we're going to do a lot of that today. We're going to try to get to as many questions as we can. This is one of my favorite things, is just to kind of dive into maybe the challenges you're having with story and to really just help as many of you as possible to move forward. So we're going to do a little bit of teaching. Kylie's going to do a little bit of teaching on the conscious story formula, which is kind of what we use inside our agency. We've done a couple hundred launches, sold, I think, over 500,000 online programs. We've been doing this game for a long time and work closely with Sounds True. It's kind of been one of our main partners. And you can submit questions. We had some pre-submitted questions, and you can also drop your questions into the chat. So you can do that at any time. And when we shift to the question and answer session, we'll take both the pre-submitted questions and also we'll answer some of your questions live. I don't know, we didn't talk about this beforehand, but if somebody wants to ask their question live, you could raise your hand too, and we might take a few questions that way too. It's always fun to have people come on and ask them that way.
Yeah, I would say put your hand up over putting it in the chat, because the chat just moves so fast. If you know you want to ask a question live, get your hand up and we'll rotate between the pre-submitted and the people that are here.
Yeah, and I was going to say, and this is all part of a course that we're doing called Your Story Matters. This is a course that Kylie and I teach. It has both pre-recorded material and we're doing some live Q&A sessions with it. And if the Sounds True team could drop the link in there. During today, we're just going to try to teach as much as possible and give you as much value. And at the end, we will take, 5 minutes and explain more about the course. I know we have had a lot of people take this course, and it really is influential in helping them to get their story into the world. So let's get going. We don't have that much time, and these hours just fly by really fast. And so I'm going to hand it over to Kylie. And Kylie, can you share more about what is the conscious story formula, and basically kind of flow us through what that formula is and how it can help people?
Yeah, I would love to. And it's really cool how this all came together, because in the beginning of my career in 2012, I was kind of fumbling through the dark, figuring out how to tell stories and getting really extraordinary results with them. And I had kind of created my own processes based on what I was doing. And then people were asking for formulas and structures and formats. And I was like, well, I don't have that for you. Just tell a story, just write a story. And then people were just really wanting structure. So I finally reverse engineered everything I did. And I was able to give them the structure they were looking for. But then when I started working with Richard, he also had his own processes and his own systems that had been responsible for like 250 successful launches in a decade. And we were able to kind of take our work and overlap it. And that's really where this formula comes from. And so now that I work primarily with him, we have this process dialed in, and it's just the process we go through from the very first meeting we have with our client to trying to figure out like, who are they and what are they about and how do they want to be represented, all the way to when we're working on our own courses like this one here. So we talked about this a little bit in the first training, and I'm guessing a lot of you probably were there or heard the recording. And that is the neuroscience. Like, we always want to start with the neuroscience. I won't repeat the teaching from last time, but we did talk about oxytocin. We talked about dopamine. We talked about just all these different feel-good chemicals in the brain. So where I want you to start with telling your story using this formula is asking yourself the question, is this going to foster connection or not? Because if the story is going to foster connection, you're going to get the brain to feel really, really good in all those ways. Primarily oxytocin. I want you to write something down, type it out, or write it down with a pencil or whatever. I want you to watch this video after you get off this training. Okay, put it in YouTube. Put in Google reunion. That is the best story I have ever seen in any ad. And I showed it to Tammy last year when we did this. And I'm like, can I please play this on the training? It was just, it would have taken too much time. So we didn't do it. But if your story can create connection, then you can move on to step two. And that is the best connection I've ever. I cried my eyes out. Even Tammy was like, I cried when I watched it. So good. You got to watch it.
I
Okay.
cried too, which doesn't really tell you much because if like I cry on like sports movie and war movies, like I'm a crier. If you get next to me in a drama, like I'm crying. So, but no, it's amazing. Kylie's absolutely right.
You got to watch it. Okay. So the second step really in all of this, and as you can see, if you're looking at the page for our course, you can see we're basically walking you through the different phases of the course. So if you are to jump on board with us and take that course, you're basically learning a deep dive of this formula. So the second part is about your brand story archetype and your audience archetype. I use the Carl Jung system of archetypes. He has 12 archetypes that explains like the unconscious mind and the movement of meaning through the psyche and the soul and all of that. And I figured to myself, like, if it goes that deep and it can account for anything, it's got to be applicable to storytelling too. Like if it applies to our dreams and our meaning and our the way things happen in the world, it's got to apply to storytelling. And so I was able to really look at his 12 archetypes, and each archetype has its own journey. So I'll give you a quick example. The alchemist archetype, which probably a lot of you resonate with, I'm guessing, are all little magicians and alchemists and people who have a lot of transformative power. The journey for that alchemist archetype is going to be from not believing in themselves to creating something completely different that the world has never seen before. So when we are able to identify our archetype, we're able to look at our soul's journey of what our soul needs for growth, and we're able to see that for our audience also. So if I know that my audience is alchemist, which I do know that primarily it is, then I'm going to have to load them up with stories that are going to encourage them to use their full power, because somewhere along the lines, they saw power misused in the world. And so they give theirs up and they don't create as big as they're supposed to because they see the abuse of power and they're like, I'm never, ever, ever going to be that person. And so then they don't do their mission. So once you know the archetype of your audience, this really helps you to understand what I would call the client hero's journey and what path of growth your story needs to take them on. And and I'll pass it over to Richard in a minute, but what's really powerful about this is in this type of storytelling, you become the mentor. So a lot of people ask me, like, there's supposed to be a hero in a story, there's a protagonist, there's a hero. How do I share my story without making myself the hero? I don't want to be the hero. I don't want it to be about me. So the awesome reality check on that is that your story isn't about you. It's about your audience and helping them to grow. So sometimes we do have a need just to tell our story and share our story, and that's fine. We'll teach you how to do that. But if we're doing it to create a movement or to create interest in a product or service or to bring a spiritual teaching into the world, we usually want to put them first. And what that does is that makes them the hero of the story and it makes us the mentor of the story. So basically, you're Yoda, they're Luke. Like you want to be Yoda, you want to be the wise mentor that they encounter throughout the storytelling process. And you want them to be Luke. And your whole purpose in sharing your story is to empower Luke to go and do what he needs to do to save the world. So you kind of pass him that lightsaber and then he goes off and he does his thing. And that's really who you are. And then what you start to do is you really put this storyline into all your teachings or offers. So when you start to share your stories from this lens, you share the story that is true for you through this particular lens of seeing it. What happens is you speak to someone in such a deep and powerful way that they're already looking for what it is that you're saying. And so that's a really, really powerful way to look at it. I know Richard has a lot to say about hooks, so I'll pass it off to him. But once we know what that story is and the journey that your audience is on and how you can mentor them and how you can be that brand mentor, we're going to start to really look at how to break through the noise. I had a client one time who was really good with viral video content, and he used to tell me, Kylie, there's 60 billion pieces of content uploaded every day to the internet across all social platforms. which is like so intimidating, but it's not, because there's a couple of ways that you can, that you can use to break through attention. But there's also this really cool thing. I won't get too into it right now. There's something called market sophistication, and it talks about how often people have seen something similar to what it is that you're saying in the market. And when it's very saturated and very sophisticated, the best thing that you can do for your audience is tell them a story, because they've seen the same thing over and over and over and over again, but what they've never seen is your story. So your story is actually the greatest way to get attention possible. But I know, like, Richard, you have your take on hooks too. Do you want to kind of jump in here as well? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. I think one of the number one rules on a story is, to kind of, well, first of all, to make so that you're the mentor, so that you position yourself as a mentor, and then I would say get their attention. But a lot of times, I'm sure some of you have heard you have to get people to know, like, and trust you, but nobody ever tells you how to do that. And really, one of the best ways is story. And you probably have more stories than you realize. You're going to have your anchor stories, like your origin stories, and maybe a pivot story. And Kylie will, that's part of what the program is to get that out of you. But there's also a different way to look at it. And a lot of these hooks that draw people in come from this know, like, trust. And I have a fourth one, which is believe. And you can figure out what type of story matches each of these four buckets. And I'll just go into them quickly so you have it. So in case you don't take the course, you at least know the big buckets. The first one is know, and that's kind of like, it positions you as an authority. It positions you as a mentor. And so the how that happens is you share your model, you share your origin story, and you share some teachings. So a lot of it's knowledge. A lot of people are natural at doing that. And when you get on camera, it's actually easy when you get in a teaching mode to share stories around your teaching. The second is like, that's kind of like your backstory, where you came from, and kind of a day-to-day in your life. And then there's trust. And this is one of the most interesting for probably for me, because in our markets, we really want people to not trust from like a weird manipulate people, but trust where people can feel you. One of my clients, Thomas Hubel, says, "I feel you feeling me." So you want the person on the other side of your story to feel that you understand them and they understand you. It's like a energetic loop almost. It's like a field. And how you do that, this is a great secret. It took me many years to figure this out. I could tell you an origin story about that, but I won't, because I want to save time for questions. You share your values, you share what you're deeply committed for, and you also share your stance in the world. And many people don't do this. So even you could know somebody knows what they're talking about. You might even kind of like them, but you might not trust them. It's kind of a funny thing. And we buy from people we trust. And so there's easy ways to do this. And then last is belief. And this is the one that I think is really good, because a lot of you may be like, well, how do I tell my story? And I know I want to be selling something on the back end, but I don't want to be salesy. So how do I do that, right? And this belief is what you do is you want to share how you transformed and how you made that happen, and also how you've helped clients. So it's a lot of it's taking the storytelling method that we're going to share with you, and Kylie's going to share with you, and then you're going to be telling stories as a mentor for the stories of the people you've transformed. And so this is the transformational experiences. This is the case studies for yourself and for other people. When you do that well, then from a place of conviction is not something that you have to manufacture. If I know that I've just launched a certain program and sold 100,000 units and made X amount of money, I don't have to pretend that it works. I just share the results. Or if I'm a fitness coach, I just share the before and after results. Or if I'm a relationship coach, I just share the results. I'm not trying to push it on somebody. I'm just like, and then I invite people, hey, if you want that same result, you get it too. So this conviction is really interesting. When you have that, you don't have to be pushy. Neither do you lean back. You're not shy about it either. You're just like, well, this is kind of what I do. So all four of those buckets are important, and all of them rely on the story formula and how you put together your archetype. And they will give you endless stories and content to help you in your business. It's really amazing. I'm going to pass it back to you, Kylie. Do you want to share more about kind of this next step in this formula, which is how you move some of this into actually real applications? Because we can talk about story all day, but it's kind of like we have to move it into different media forms.
Once you know what your story is or your stories are, we talk about a creation story. That's one of the forms I teach you. And that's really your origin story. And it's a story you'll want to share it all the time, everywhere. But there's also different types of stories like the pivot story that I teach, or some of the different ones that Richard teaches you in the course. Once you kind of know what those stories are, then they have to go into a format. So we've got to sort of have a specific application of the story. So in the course, I did an entire bonus series on this particular thing because I really wanted you to get mastery over it. So you need to put your story in a social post or an email or a podcast interview or a podcast or a TEDx talk or a book proposal. And so we did really give you the formats to do that by interviewing the people who are the best at the world in those areas. So I'm not going to get too into it today, but you will want to always think like, what's the best format for the story that I'm telling for these particular specific applications? Like if I was telling a story in a TEDx talk, I would come up with my 3 points that I was trying to make. And I would come up with 3 stories that correlate with each of those points. I would also do that with a webinar. If I was sharing it in a social post, I would go back to those archetypes and say, what is my audience archetype? What are they feeling? Where are they disempowered? What do they need to do to feel empowered? And how can I share like a short anecdote that gets them there? And so your story, it's really going to always be evolving and changing. And as you meet your audience with what they want and respond to what's happening in the world, the story kind of is constantly recreating itself, which also, in a sense, can turn your story into a movement if that's what you're actually looking for. So some of you are like, no, I just want to tell my story to one person and change one life. There's also people on here that are like, I want to start a movement. I have this great message inside of myself. I've learned it through decades of hardship. I'm an overcomer, and I want this to spark a huge movement. And so this is the way that you would do that also. If you just want to help 5 people, this is the way you would do it also. And then you basically get feedback from seeing how your audience responds to what you're doing, and you refine it there. So we really believe that when you learn and implement this story formula, you'll be able to make a bigger impact in the world and get your work out to those who need it most. And for those of you who do join us, we will talk a little bit more about the course today, but for those of you who do join us, we'll be going really deep into all these steps and all these topics so that you leave the course and you're like, I know my story, I know how to share it, I know where to share it, I know how to get people to respond to it. And that's really our goal for you if you work with us for the 8 weeks. So yeah, why don't we dive into questions? I see some hands raised. We can start with the hand raisers and then move into some of the typed out questions. So Dee Dee, why don't you, I see you've been waiting the longest. Why don't you, let me ask you to unmute. You should be able to unmute.
I did. Hi, thank you. This sounds wonderful. I'll be brief. I'm very excited. So I've been a social worker for 40 years with children. I'm a therapist. And I've written 11 chapters about that, about childhood in the last 50 years and why there's so much anxiety and depression in children based on the kids I've been seeing and my own memoir. So I guess my question is, this sounds super exciting because it's definitely my origin story. I do want to start a movement of children having more play and less adult driven. Oh, y'all, I could talk for hours. But anyway, so I'm editing it and this sounds lovely. I don't know if that's a question, but just I want to keep going on it because I think these stories are important and children are the future stewards of this planet. So I work with very young children in high school age and middle school. And what they do when they come to see me with a so-called diagnosis or problem. There's not the children don't have the disorders, y'all. Our culture does, okay? If that makes sense.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so is there, it just sounds like you're excited. So we would definitely be excited to work with you. We work,
Thank you.
I would say we work with a lot of therapists because therapists have a lot of resistance to marketing and to getting their stories out. And it's like, how much can I tell client story or not? So there's a lot of things that we can help you with therapists. And I think helping children is, I have two daughters, so I'm
It's
always passionate
incredible.
about,
It's
yeah,
lovely.
helping it.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll flip back to the doc and take a pre-submitted question. This is from Christine. I think this is an amazing question. In marketing, is there really ever a purity of intention? Aren't we always trying to sell something? Richard, do you want to speak to that first?
Well, I think we talked about this, I think, on the last call, but intent really matters. And so if you go with the intention to be of highest service, then that's important. I think in traditional sales, the intention is to close the sale at all costs, even whether the person needs it or not, or wants it, or has the money or not. I think in what I would call more conscious, a more conscious approach that we suggest is to help people make the best decision, whatever that is for the people. And so I think it's a good question, and I always like to frame it as giving people the information they need to make the decision, and also inviting them into deeper levels of transformation. And some people are ready and some aren't. Sometimes there's a financial issue with that, and that really comes down to the type of program. And in some markets, it's important to charge money, or else people won't value it. There's a whole massive teaching that we could go on, not in here, but about that. And then in some markets, it's important. We did the Wisdom of Traba with Gabor Mate. In fact, he did a live talk in Denmark just last month, and I did the online marketing for it. And we did donation based only, but that we had a suggested donation, so anybody could watch it for free. But we also had a suggested donation of $27, and it did really, really, really well. And we probably had 4,000 people that donated something, and we probably had 4,000 people that watched it for free. So there's lots of different models and things. So that's a short answer. We could unpack that more, and it depends on the specific case and things like that.
Yeah, I think it too. I think that's great. I don't have a lot to add, but I will say I think we need to really look at what does the word sell mean? Because when I hired a guy to help me with my sales a long time ago, when I knew that what I had to offer was really valuable, but I had a really hard time like putting a monetary value on it, and then like sharing that monetary value with other people was a really big struggle that I had in the beginning. And he really helped me to see that selling as being of service. So if I'm on a bus in a journey through Costa Rica and it's really hot and my friend gets a headache, and I have some homeopathic remedy in my pocket that would get rid of their headache, and I just don't give it to them, that's that's like what we're doing when we withhold our offers from people. It's like, oh, I've got the solution right here, but I'm gonna let you have a headache instead because I don't want to be pushy. I don't want to push this thing on you, so I'm just gonna keep it in my pocket. And so that's like a lot of the way that I see it, is that just let go of the word selling, let go of the word marketing, and really replace it with connection and service. And when you know that you have a solution to somebody's problem, I've heard it said that you have a sacred obligation to sell when you know that you can really help somebody. And I have come to believe that. I have a lot easier time pricing and selling my offers now than I used to, but I feel like the words themselves have such a negative connotation that it's usually not the concept that's the problem, it's the connotations we have on the words. And so I just tell people, don't say sell, don't say market, say connect, say serve, like let those words go. And then what is there when they're gone, what's left. So yeah, I love that question. It comes up all the time. That's why I picked it. Glenda, why don't we pull you up next? Let me ask you to unmute. You should be able to unmute.
Thank you. I've been resisting putting together information I've learned. And even there's a man named Lama Surya Das told me I should write a book, but I've been resisting this. And then I got the email from Tami, and I love Sounds True, and they introduced you all. and I've signed up and paid for your program.
Welcome. Thank
what's,
you.
oh man, you cut through the chase like what I am told I can do. I've got the knack of it. Like I teach a weekly Zoom meeting on A Course in Miracles and Dzogchen Buddhism, and that's for over 2 years. But I have some way, a knack to cut through to these truths and then give them out. So I've done the research and to do these teachings, right? But I just haven't trusted somebody to help me put it together. And so I have a YouTube
Tammy
channel.
didn't trust anybody else until she kind of started working with us too. And I'm glad she did, because we really, we helped her
I
get
believe
that.
in that woman. I believe in that woman and her
We all do.
company, right? Right.
She's
So
amazing.
thank you all so much, because it has to be cut through to the simplest. Because people will tell me, I've been studying Dzogchen 15 years, and how'd you just get this? Well, see, I don't know how I just got it. I could cut through it or understand it and apply it, integrate it in my life. And I
Right.
teach how to do that. And people tell me I've made a difference in their life. But anyway, so I realized I should share this. It can help more than my little Zoom group,
Yeah. Well, we welcome you into the program, Glenda. Thank you so much for sharing. We're excited to have you. And we've helped a lot of spiritual teachers get their work in the world. And it's so interesting when you just show up with the intent to give and as an act of service, and you just make an invitation. It doesn't need to be more complex, but there is a way to make your story more powerful in the world, and to get the detail down. And there's different formulas that you can use, and there's probably a lot of stories you've forgotten that are important. And so we look forward to working with you.
Oh, thank you all. Thanks.
Richard,
You're
do
on
you
mute.
have one off the document you want to read?
Sure.
Do you have
Yeah.
one off the document you want to read? Yeah.
Just quickly, all the dates are on the sales page, so you can go on to there, and
It's on the FAQ section. You can scroll to the bottom and look at the FAQ section, and everything is laid out for you right there.
right. Yeah. One of the questions we get is, how do I share like if I'm a psychologist, or if I've worked with a client. Sometimes this happens with like people who've worked with corporations or whatever. And so how do I share testimonials without violating non-disclosure or whatever? And so I think it is definitely case dependent, but what you can do is look at a lot of different therapists. We've worked with like Esther Perel and Terry Real and Dick Schwartz and Gabor Mate and a lot of psychologists, and they're sharing stories all the time. Like the reason you're drawn in, like if you pick up Gabor's book, it's just filled with stories. If you pick up Eckhart Tolle's book, he's talking about his stories and stories of other people. So I think what you'll find is the leading therapists in the world are telling stories all the time about clients, about interactions, and they're doing it as a way to teach, and also as a way to draw people to go deeper and to actually make the change. I think one of the most important parts of a story for therapists and other types of clients is there's a type of story that helps people see what's possible and helps people to see when they're ready to make the change. And so it's kind of like a before and after. And so you help people to see that they don't have to keep on the same road that they're on, and that it's actually even possible to get the result. Because a lot of people inwardly don't think that they can do it. And so stories about people who didn't think it was possible, but then studied your method system and then made it happen, those are really important stories. And the reason is because it helps people go from prospect to that's not for me, or I could never do that, to I could do that. So you could look at any industry, and this is important, like whether it's like running a marathon or healing a relationship or overcoming some gruesome trauma that happened to you in the past, that like pivot point where people go, okay, I'm ready to face this, and then they get over it. It's really important. So I hope that I kind of deviated a little bit off the question, but it's important because I know a lot of you probably have some version of that.
Yeah, I think that's great. Hamish, I hope I'm saying your name right. I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yes, perfect. Hamish, Scottish for
Thank you.
Jane.
Good.
So I like Linda. I'm very much looking forward to doing this course. I've already signed up. I'll try to make this short because I know you have a lot of questions. I'm an actor, writer, singer, and medical clown. So I have a life story that I've already written, and I perform it on the stage. It's called My Autopsy, and it's about 70 to 75 minutes long. So I've performed it in the UK, in the US, here in Canada, and also in India, always to really amazing positive response. I just want to hone it in now so that I know exactly what I have written and I can get clarity on, say, the 12 archetypes, so I can get clarity on my own hero's journey and offer it to as many people as I can. I'm not here for shameless promotion, but what I want to do is actually take it to Broadway and also to the West End in London. I'm doing more work on Instagram, where I do my little blurbs on Instagram, and all of it, for my heart, is in service. So I know that I am in service, and that gives me life to offer my own life from the year of 5 to the year of 50, I'm now 72, to a larger, wider audience. So can you tell me a little bit more? I mean, of course, I'll get this during the sessions. Can you tell me a little bit more of how I can benefit from your amazing course? Thank you.
I mean, the main thing is just it's kind of like really take strong action. And so I mean, the course has a lot of information, and so the more you can get in there and listen to it, and then just write, do the actions. And I think because you're already writing, and already what you may find is, oh, I can make this part better, and I can make this part better, and I can add this. And so my guess is you're gonna have some ahas with every module. The other thing is we'll share a lot of the applications. So how to like pre-market your book and how to start to share bits of it here to get people interested so that when you actually get it out there, you have buyers. And so that's important. The worst thing is to pour your heart and soul into an online program or into a book or a podcast, and then you get it out there and it's kind of crickets. And so you can start to get it out and start to share bits and pieces before it's even out there. Also, Kylie's got some great stuff about getting on podcasts and things like that. It'll help you to put your story into forms of media, so that will drive people to Amazon and other places to buy your book too. So I think there's tons of useful information in there. So I think you'll get all kinds of information.
Thank you so much. Let's have fun. It's great
Okay.
to do your story. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're welcome. Kylie and I was just in Barcelona. I'm in Barcelona right now. It's where I live, and we just got done with a mastermind, and we had 10 souls fly in from around the world. It was amazing. And one of the teachings I gave in there was one of the most important questions you can ask is, well, there's two. One is, how is this useful? And then, how does this change my behavior? And so it moves you out of like information gathering into, how do I, is it useful in some area of my business, which is kind of what you asked. It was a good question. The follow-up question is always like, how do I move through my day so that it changes how I operate? And that's an even more interesting question. So it might change how you write a story or how you think about the structure of certain things that you're writing, things like that. So,
yeah, I love that. We have a really good question from the chat. This question comes up a lot. I really love it. Thank you, Richard and Kylie. I've been part of one of your earlier programs during the pandemic and very much appreciate your work. However, I find myself still languishing on the perimeter of sharing from an open-hearted depth space that I desire to work and be of service from as a licensed psychotherapist. Can you speak to navigating that line between the prescribed silence psychological professions are taught to maintain and heart-centered sharing the world needs much appreciation? You work with a lot of therapists. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I kind of want to pitch this one back to you. Do you have a thought on it?
When I've worked with a lot of psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, and they couldn't tell their story. Like for ethical reasons, they actually couldn't tell their origin story. So what I worked with them on, which I thought was really great, was the origin story of their body of work. So this one particular therapist that I knew in San Diego, she was a NARM therapist. It's neuroaffective relational model. It's a relatively new evidence-based treatment for complex trauma, not shock trauma, but like complex trauma. And instead of her sharing all her trauma and all her pain and all this healing she went through, we did it from the lens of her journey as a therapist, seeing that the modalities that she was working with weren't helping her clients to the degree that she had hoped, and how it kept her researching and researching until she finally found this thing. And now people are getting the help that she had originally desired for them to get. And so we told a story about her body of work and her motivation behind her work instead of her own personal struggles and pain. So that can work really good for people in the helping professionals that aren't allowed to. If you're allowed to, but you're just nervous about it, then I would say start really small. Start with your why story instead of your big, this is my vulnerability and this is how I overcame it. Start with like, this is why I do what I do. This is why I'm passionate about what I'm passionate about. Start with something really simple like that. So that's really how I would, that's how I would address that question. It comes up all the time. I think it's a really good one.
Yeah, and sometimes it's about how you found the method, and it could be a method that you use, like kind of like Kylie said. I remember Dick. Does anyone know who Dick Schwartz is? He founded Internal Family System. I was living in Maui, and he flew to Maui, and I filmed him for a 3-part series in my office when I had one there. And I had him tell his origin story about how he discovered IFS. And he talked about sitting across from a client, and he had been studying like family, family therapy, I think. And as he was working with the person, he thought, what if I looked at the person like inside their head? They had a family inside their head, and they started to talk to the different parts. And so he literally had the origin story for Internal Family Systems. So the first video, we told that. It was really fascinating, and then it just kind of unfolded from there. And so a lot of the teaching and the marketing just merge into one. And it's when we learn how somebody learned or earned something, we give them authority, we give them credibility. We go, oh, that's how you figured it out, and then it sticks, and then we know. We have confidence in them. Then something clicks over, and then we don't forget it. So it's really important. Why don't we switch over to another live question? I think is it like Amy? Are you next? Maybe. You guys are really active. I'm having a hard time keeping up with chat and the spreadsheet and the here, but well, we're doing our best. So I might have to. Yeah. Hi, Amy.
Hi. Thanks for taking my question. I'm a logistical person, and so I'm on the page with the information, and so I see that that it's primarily a pre-recorded thing. So it's 8 online sessions, 10 hours of training that are pre-recorded. So
there's four Q&As that are 90 minutes. So that's an extra. Is that 6 hours?
Yeah.
So it's 16 hours actually is quite a lot. Yeah.
Got it. So 6 hours would be interactive, but how many people? Paint me a picture of like what those 90 minutes would be. So it's primarily a do this on your own type thing. Like here's the content, go write the stories and do it. And then we'll have these question and answer sessions. How many people would be on those Q&A sessions?
I'm not sure how many. It sounds
Are we
like
talking hundreds or like?
Let's just say there's 100. I would say most sessions we have between 20 and 30 questions. So if you have a specific question, you would just want to get your hand up right away, and then you could get it in. It does rely. I mean, the truth is, it does rely on you just doing the work. If you do the work and go through the modules, the other thing I would say is a lot of your questions will be asked by other people. Like it's striking how many questions, like you're ready for your question, and then like the person right before you asked the exact same question that you had, like how do I share my story without offending family members? Like we probably got that question like 20 times, you know, like how much of my story do I share? How little of I? So there's like a group of questions that come up over and over again. So what I would say is what we find in the group programs is the questions that other people ask normally support you. And so that's just the nature of it. To work with us one-on-one just isn't possible. And we actually want this work to get out to as many people as possible, not as few. So if you're looking for like an intimate 10-person gathering with us,
Right.
that's not this. So this program is not, that the price is not it's not the same deal that way.
Sure,
Because we're not able to. So
right. I just wanted to get clear on like, and so it's your experience that if you keep up with the 8 weeks and do the content and ask the questions along with the timeline that you've provided, that people are walking away with kind of what they've needed to successfully put this all together, even though
Yeah,
We think so. And also Sounds True. We got together with Sounds True and had a conversation about it because last year we did teach all the modules live, and they actually told us that I hope I'm not putting anyone on Sounds True on the spot here, but they told us that people were getting better success with the hybrid model. Like more people were actually finishing the course with the hybrid model. That's why we decided to do it. They were getting better client and customer success stories from letting people do the course at their own pace and then coming on for Q&As. And so we actually set it up for the highest degree of success with the course, as opposed to just like putting recordings in there for you. It was really well thought out.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That's really helpful and it's really exciting. I'm really good putting out.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. It looks like people are asking for the other. Okay. Thank you, Soleil.
I love that you were walking on a treadmill too. I'm a step kind of guy as well. So I was like just silently cheering you as you were walking there. I was like, get more steps, go.
Yeah, Richard, do you want to pull another one off the sheet?
Sure. Yeah. I think this is a good one. Question: some stories can make us feel worse when it leads to comparison. Others can find a solution. Is it enough to be authentic in your storytelling and not to add to other people's distress? So this is like in traditional marketing, it's like focus on the pain point, like driving the pain point. And we don't take that approach, just so you know. It's like the opposite of how we work. And if you're only focusing on the positive, you're going to tell really terrible stories. Okay. So, generally stories need to have, Kylie, help me out here. They need to have a dip down. They need to have, the villain or the thing went wrong. And most people, that's how they change. They see that. So rather than pain or making people feel bad, you want to tell the truth. And a lot of times the truth about your story or your client's story is they've had something that's gone wrong or put them in a situation where they need to change. So for me, as an example, my health right before I turned 50, I don't know if I mentioned this last call. If I did, forgive me, but I got diagnosed with Lyme's disease and COVID the same day. And so I kind of went downhill really fast. And I came into my 40, I was going to be 50 and I was like, I got to do something for my health. So I could tell that story about how I had ignored my health for 30 years. I was drinking 8 cups of coffee a day. And so I'm telling it from a perspective so that others can either recognize the same pattern in them, or somebody who's going through something significant and has a health thing can see the other side. And I can talk about the transformation. If, like one of our friends is Michael Haig, who writes a lot of the storytelling for movies. And he's like, the most boring story in the world, if somebody starts with money and ends with more money, or starts with good health and ends with good health, or is born enlightened and ends enlightened. Like there's no struggle, there's no drama. So we need to have that built in, and Kylie is really good at helping you to do that. Yeah, I hope that answers. Kylie, do you have any thoughts on this one?
No, I did. And then he started talking and I was like, nope, that's pretty much it right there. Chris, do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. I popped this in already in the chat to Richard, but I'm starting a nonprofit to provide plant medicine and psychedelic medicine healing containers for those who would never be able to have access for PTSD and so forth. And the people who could benefit most oftentimes have little to no access to this.
Right.
And so it's a nonprofit model. And so mine's about fundraising. So does this workshop and just what you guys do apply, and do you work with nonprofits or donor based from a fundraising model of kind of reallocating, in a sense, the world resources into this?
Yeah, I helped an anti-trafficking organization in Austin win a grant one time through teaching them storytelling. I did a half day VIP day pro bono consulting with them because they were working with something that was really near and dear to my heart, but they weren't doing a great job of conveying their message to others. And so I remember walking in there and I was like, all right, get my money. Like, you have 5 minutes, you have my full attention, get me to get my credit card out and donate to you. And they started talking about policy and they started talking about laws and they started talking about this and that. And I was like, you just lost me. Like, I actually really, really care about what you're doing. I actually really, really care about what you're doing. However, I'm not giving you my money because you just bored me to tears and alienated me with your storytelling. And so I helped them to come up with a story. They were in Austin, and most people in Austin are in tech or are entrepreneurs. And so I got them to see that their donor base was, if they created a donor base of Austin entrepreneurs, what would the story be about? And I was like, entrepreneurs stand for freedom. You're standing for freedom. How can you share stories about freedom that empowers people and excites them about the solution instead of inundates them with the problem? So they were able to take that session that day and they made a bunch of videos that got a lot more traction. They got a grant. They started telling more stories. So while there's not going to be a specific module on donor storytelling, I do believe all the storytelling that you'll learn, nonprofits have to know this type of storytelling, because otherwise it's just more, I'm asking for money, it's more noise. Just like with marketing something, I'm asking for money, it's more noise. So telling stories, I think, is the best way to get your donor base to donate. My dad managed a $60 million a year nonprofit budget for like 30 or 40 years for Catholic Charities. And when he asked me what I was doing, he didn't understand my career at all. And he was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm just telling people stories so that they do something. And he was like, oh, you're putting a face on it.
Right.
And that's the language that he used in his nonprofit fundraising. Like, you put a face on it. You don't just say like, send money to these hungry kids. You show pictures of them, right? And so there's a lot of different angles you can take it from, but I do think that the nonprofit world very much can benefit from this work. And I know that just from my firsthand experience helping them.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like charities like Charity Water, one of the more successful ones, that it's all led with story. And there's a story about psychedelics in the market and how it's transformed PTSD and different, psychedelic assisted therapy. There's a huge story behind that. I don't know, we've worked with a lot of nonprofits. Wisdom of Trauma was also it was anything that went through that launch we did, which was story based, I might add, was a donation to a 501c3 too as well. So and that, I think that was the most successful, second most successful documentary launch ever. So the first was probably Chosen, which is a Christian documentary, who like that was just off the charts. So Yeah. So I hope that answered your question. I mean, better storytelling is going to help you definitely with a nonprofit. The nice thing with a nonprofit is there's normally a value and a stance you're taking in the market, nor there's normally the story is just built in. You just have to tell it, put the right pieces together, and then put it everywhere, you know.
Well, is there anything you want to share about the course, Richard, in our last few minutes here, or do you want to take one more question? We only have a few minutes left.
Oh, wow. It's just, I was like saying
It went
earlier,
by
it's like
so fast. I know.
it flies by. Yeah, I mean, I would just say, if you're on the, I mean, all the information is on the sales page. If you're on the edge, then just join us. And I think I would just say that the key thing is the story is a differentiator between those that really break out and those that get the attention and drive the people. And it's important. Yeah, you make money, but it's also how you make a bigger impact in the world. And it's just interesting because I can look at the biggest spiritual teachers, the biggest therapists, the biggest nonprofits, the biggest and the biggest companies in the world, and they all have to tell their story, find the right way to tell their story. And then a lot of times what's interesting is then you just have to tell it over and over again to more people. That's kind of how you scale, and put it in different places. So it's really the key that it's why there kind of needs to be a course on just storytelling. If you're writing a book, it's all about story. If you're starting a company, it's about the story. If you're going to be active on social media, it's about the story. So that's why we're doing this, is to really, so you can be, you know, on the road to mastery. I don't know if you ever master story. I think it's a lifelong practice, you know. So that's what I would say. We have we've put a ton of bonuses in there. Like, we're just going to give you everything we can on those Q&A calls. It's 6 hours with us. You can, I think one of the other viewers was like, how much personalization? I think it's really, you have to take 100% responsibility to just go all in and extract the value. It's a really fun time because you can finish the year strong. And then next year, it's like, put it in your program, write your book, start your podcast. You know, like we want you not just to tell your story, we want you to like get it out into the market, kind of like how is it useful? So that's kind of what we're about in Conscious Marketer. How about you, Kylie? Any thoughts or any last parting thoughts for people here?
Well,
Thanks for
I would
joining us,
definitely
everybody.
I would definitely check out the bonus section. We try to make our bonus section better than the entire course and worth more than the entire course. And I think we did that here. There was a question earlier in the chat that I saw about how do people of color fit into some of the storytelling methods. And that's something that Tami and Richard and I feel very strongly about, is making sure that that gets addressed. And so there's a bonus by one of my favorite people in the entire world who I took a DEI 9-month coaching program with a couple of years ago, and she really addresses that in her bonus. Her name is Jessica Dixon. So I feel like that is one way to kind of look at that perspective from what we put together. And then we've got like how to get on podcasts, how to make videos. We have a storytelling mastery interview series that with someone who can help you get on the TEDx stage, help you write your book proposal. The book proposal person happens to be Sounds True's book proposal person. So that's the person reading your proposal when it comes through. And yeah, so check out the bonuses and see if that feels good to you. Sorry, I'm having some beeping going on over here. I kept turning that application off and it keeps beeping. So my apologies for that distraction. But yeah, I think take a look at the modules, take a look at the bonuses. There's lots of questions coming in about scholarships. There are 50% and 75% scholarships, or I'm sorry, 25 and 50% for this course if there is true need. So you can write into Sounds True and they can help you kind of assess that and figure that out. They have a support@soundstrue.com email. If there's a better email to write to, they can put that in the chat for you. I don't know, Richard said he might want to stay on and answer a few more questions. That's totally up to you.
Why don't we just do two questions, and if you come on, just be clear on the question, and then we'll we'll send everybody off with lots of love and heart. And I really like these Q&As. I could do this all night, but I know everybody's got things, and we have to. The Sounds True team probably wants to has the next webinar they have to do. So Jillian, do you want to come on and just share? Just be really focused on your question, and we'll answer 2 more questions, and then we'll go.
Thank you so much. So I'm really interested in your course because I use a lot of storytelling and it works. I'm growing a UK faith-based charity. My question is, how much does a course address movement making, movement building? You've mentioned that a couple of times, because when you tell your story, other people think about their stories, and then there's a possibility of trauma and a sort of a need relationship building up. So in what way, if you're building a movement, do you use story to keep everyone safe in your movement that you're building up? Because you tell your story. My story is around cancer and suffering, and then people start to reflect on that story, and I sometimes feel overwhelmed. I'm getting everybody else's story keeps coming back to me, and I've got ways to keep myself healthy in this. But does your course address how to build? Thank you.
Yeah, I think the movement is woven into it all, and typically stories, whether it's an AA group or a cancer group or somebody trying to run their first marathon, the movement is a supportive feature. I think because you're not alone, and so and it makes it actually safer for somebody to do a lot of the work. And then also, if you can recognize the movement that you're part of, then it's easier to figure out how your story fits in the movement, because the movement means that there's different stories underneath the movement, and then one of the things that is really useful if you can do this is to become one of the leaders in the movement. And so that's part of your story, is to be a leader in, I don't know what kind of cancer treatment, but it could be alternative medicine, or it could be a new way of looking at it, or so there's different segments in the movement. For example, in therapy or in trauma-based, we work with Thomas Hubel, and the movement he kind of created was collective. It's not like he created, but he recognized there was a collective trauma, and so he did a summit on that. And so, bam, he's one of probably the premier leader in that movement, because he's made it well known, and now it's talked about by all the therapists. So, but part of that was his story. He's living in Israel right now and seeing all the trauma that's happening on both sides. So I hope that answered your question. Yeah, so it's integrated in, and it's a really good question. Both Kylie and I are super fascinated by movements and how it integrates with story.
Thank you.
There is a bonus specifically about movement creation by a friend of mine, AJ Marisha. He's really great with making movements, but I second what Richard said as well. Yeah.
AG is great. He has a company called Movement Makers. That's literally like that's his company. So that's what he helps people do. So yeah. Robin, you're going to be the last question, and then we're a few minutes over. Thank you, Sounds True, for sticking around for the call, and thanks everybody for staying on the call this long too. I appreciate all of you.
Well, thank you so much for all of this and for taking my last question. I really appreciate the person who spoke about the nonprofit. So I'm a marketing coordinator for a spiritual center that offers retreats, and we bring in multiple facilitators. And as part of my effort, trying to find the story, I get lost in the story of our center, and then also the story of all of these different partnerships that we have bringing in facilitators. And when I look at your session 6 around the story remixing, I'd love if you could talk a little bit more about how someone like me that's in a nonprofit integrating all of these different pieces, how you help us to really understand how to apply those stories in all of the different modalities that we're reaching out to our client base, and also with different offerings that we're trying to attract multiple avatars.
That's such a great question. That's I feel like we could talk 30 minutes on that. Yeah, story remixing, it's a little bit like that. Do you mind if I take a shot at this, Kylie, and then you can jump in? Yeah, I think when you're working with, because we represent multiple authors, and even if you look at Sounds True's marketing, they have to represent a lot of different stories. And so what you'll find is different. I'm not sure what center you're part of or whatever, but you'll find that different segments of your audience will resonate with different types of teachers and different types of stories. And so the main remixing that you're going to do is social media and email. And so I think it would help you because you want to pull out of the authors the stories that matter to your constituency. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And so a lot of some people are just diehard fans about a spiritual teacher, and it doesn't really matter because they know the backstory. And others, it's a new teacher and they need to be introduced. And so you see that with Sounds True's marketing, where they'll introduce you to a new teacher and tell a little bit of the story. So you can differentiate. If we've done, I think, 8 of Eckhart Tolle's launches. Kylie's written a lot of the copy. I've written some of the copy. We don't need to introduce Eckhart Tolle, really, but maybe a newer teacher that somebody doesn't know, we might put more emphasis on that story. And so we might bring that forth a bit more in that initial email and the subject line and the social media or the ads. Those are your 3 main levers. And so I would just say that it's more about figuring out what to pull up to the front when you need to, because you don't always need to, but a lot of times you do, and a lot of times it's helpful. And then you can drill down even more, and it could be Eckhart, but I may need to tell a story about, like we did the launch for Power of Presence. I might tell a story about why he created that particular program. And so it could be also program specific to, or the teacher certification. We didn't do that marketing for that, but like there's a why story gets integrated. So do you see how it's like layered, and it's dependent. But just knowing that pulling the story out of your authors is really important. And then figuring out, it's like a matching those 2 things up, like what's most relevant for your audience.
That's very helpful. We're actually working on how to have an intake form for our facilitators that's pulling those pieces out and asking them about the major points of the transformation, so that when I'm doing the marketing for their programs, that we really are serving our audience and taking them on that journey. It's really, I think that everybody in here knows that all of these things are great as you're thinking it, but what you're laying out as a framework for it to deliver that, it's just so many moving pieces so often that we need help in order to get these stories out and really serve our world.
Yeah, and the secret with your author would be to get them on like a Zoom call and record it. And if you ask the right questions, which you can get from the course, then really your content is actually their words just put back on the page. So when we work with Eckhart, we get them on calls, and then we take the transcripts, and so we have the base as an example. And so we do that with a lot of our teachers, where we're trying to get them to write actually as much of the copy, not write, but speak the copy or teach the copy is the other way to do it. And so that's how we get, but Eckhart's not going to fill out like a lot of teachers won't fill out an intake form, but if you can get them on a quick call, that would be what I would recommend. Just for, if I was running a center or a marketing director for a center, that's exactly what I would do, and the nice thing too is that copy has the presence and the resonance. It has a frequency field, and it'll make your job a heck of a lot easier. So that's good news too, right? If you've ever tried to write for spiritual teachers or therapists or anybody, and either you don't know their work or you don't know the way to phrase it, unless you're like a really, really good copywriter, it's hard to get their flow. Unless you're Kylie. Kylie could do it, of course, but I would prefer just to talk to them and ask them. So.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was a great question, Robin. So yeah. Okay, well, we're at the end of our time here. I really appreciate, we had some really great questions and ton in the chat. And we're looking forward to this course. I think it starts in November. It's a great way to end the year. If you have any questions about getting in, you can always go to support@consciousmarketer.com. Is that right? Or I'm sorry, support at soundstrue.com. You could go to support at Conscious Marketer if you wanted to get us too, but no, ask them if you have anything specific to this course. We'd love to serve you. This is one of our favorite courses. We're super excited. We're doing it again with the community. We have so much interest, and your story really does matter. And story is how we change consciousness. It's how we help other people. It's how we get our work into the world. It's how we bring in new clients and kind of make the ripple that we need to make in the world. Kylie, over to you.
Yeah, I think that's it. We really appreciate you. And again, if you have follow-up questions, there's at least another week, I think, for you to register, and you'll be getting some follow-up emails about that. But if you do have questions, just write to support at Sounds True. They'll take care of you. There are a limited number of scholarships. If you feel like you need one, you can apply for that as well. And we would just love to see you. If we don't see you in the course, thank you for being with us these last couple of weeks. We know you're very busy and you chose to spend your time with us. And if we do see you there, then we'll see you on the live Q&As and we'll get your questions answered. And yeah, either way, take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.